You want better leaders, branch managers, account reps, operation pros, people who can truly grow your landscaping business. But here's the hard truth. The best candidates are passing you by. Some never even see your opportunity. And others, they do their homework and they quietly decide, no thanks. But the worst part, you may have no idea why. Today, I'm joined by a landscaping recruiting expert to uncover what's quietly costing landscaping companies their best mid and upper level candidates, and most importantly, how you can turn it around. Everybody, it's my pleasure today to introduce you to Tito Caceres. So Tito, how's it going, man?
Going well.
We bump into each other all the time. Like I saw your smiling face recently in Vegas and we were like, what's up? We were at a conference and it seems like I always see your smiling face around these events in the industry. And it's really great to have some time. I feel like every conversation we have is like really in passing. We're like 5-10 minutes and then we're kind of going. So it's nice to have some quality time with you today.
Indeed. And glad to be on for sure. It seems like we're always passing each other and, hey, how's it going? Things are great, but glad to be on and good to see you again.
Yeah. Well, thanks for contributing to this conversation today. We're talking about recruiting, which shocker is a big problem in the green industry. But we're talking more specifically about the mid-level to higher level positions in companies, because a lot of the clients that we deal with at Landscape Leadership are kind of those $5 to $50 million companies, and they're really growing. And so those layers of management and support personnel are really important. And it's very competitive out there. And you and I have had a bunch of conversations about recruiting. So before we dig into some of these questions that I had for you, why don't you give our audience a little bit of background, tell them who Tito is, what Bloom Talent Solutions is, and give us a little snapshot of your path here in the green industry.
Yeah, sure thing. So first and foremost, I grew up in the landscape industry, and my family owned a small business, and so I was exposed to the industry. I think early on, I thought I'd never want to be in the industry, and for some reason or the other, this industry always finds a way to get back to us, and we stay in it. So and then eventually I was fortunate enough to work for a top 10 landscape contractor on the commercial maintenance side of things. Held a couple different roles there, and eventually was recruited by another agency, recruitment agency, more or less, and started learning, understanding a lot about the recruiting side of things, more on the executive search, a little bit more tactical as opposed to the typical internal recruitment that's mainly known, if you will. And so that eventually led me to right after the pandemic, I found an opportunity to kind of go after my dream. I've had an entrepreneurial spirit, and then I found it as an opportune time to go after it and started Bloom Talent Solutions about 4 years ago, actually to the week. And, we were celebrating our 4th year and we're working with companies nationwide. I'd say we probably have worked in around a little over 30 states now. In terms of types of positions, we've covered skilled labor. I'd say, like irrigation techs, those are pretty common roles, up to even some of the executive level positions, or a lot of them actually. And so pretty, in terms of pretty broad range of roles that we've helped support in this industry. And obviously keeping in mind that this is a very fragmented industry, right? Low barrier of entry and different ways of, a lot of these operators and how they structure their businesses. And so quite challenging. I've been passionate about it. It's one of the things that I've always loved to do. And especially working on the contractor side, it always felt like if there was one topic that came up every single staff meeting, production meeting, every single day, more or less, we need people. we need to fill our trucks, or we need to fill our, any number of roles, if you will. And that's more or less has led me to where I am today. And, I think we want to continue to support the industry as best as we can for one of the biggest pains, if you will.
It's probably not a week or two go by where me or one of our account management team has a conversation with one of the company owners or executives in the company where they're talking about some some high, mid to higher level position they're trying to hire for: landscape designers, business developers, account managers, branch managers. Some of these owners are now at the phase where they're like, I really would like to kind of step out and, go fishing or golfing or take some extended leave, but I don't have a good general manager, or I want to create this other branch over here. Now I'm spending all this time on the road driving, an hour and a half, 2 hours between these branches and trying to mentor the leadership. And I really want to get out of this. So I really appreciate you digging into this today. What are you seeing like right now? What are you seeing in the landscape industry when it comes to, attracting that mid to upper level type of candidate?
Yeah, it's a pretty loaded question, right? And I'm going to preface the answer to that question by saying it's a different year, Chad. I would say probably one of the more challenging years in terms of the job market holistically, and that this industry in particular. Unfortunately, has not been absolved of some of those hurdles as well that a lot of these other industries and verticals are seeing. So I wanted to just preface it by saying that it's been tough. And in regards to what some of these companies are strategically doing, obviously using external support is always great. I have seen an increase in a lot of companies. Going and staffing up with internal recruitment support as well, which is great. I think it's an underserved position. It's an underserved opportunity, especially with one of the biggest, more or less, opportunity to grow or lack thereof, if you will. So I would say this has been a very challenging year for many companies. I would say, a lot of stalling. Companies are I find are being more cautious in who they're bringing in. I don't know if this is the opportune time to talk about, the use of AI nowadays. And that's become somewhat of a learning opportunity. A lot of companies are using that to gauge whether talent is fits what they're looking for. But it has created a little bit of an impersonal touch. It's made it so that hiring has become a lot slower this year than I've probably seen over the last, at least, aside from the 2020 and the pandemic, we're talking about a decade since I've seen it this slow in terms of hiring.
So when you say slow with hiring, I mean, are you talking about the whole process is being slowed down? Like, give me a little bit about that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So what I mean by that, interviews are being stalled a lot more. I'm seeing candidates are being much more cautious as well. There's more transparency than ever before. So I'm seeing candidates are also being cautious in terms of when they're evaluating opportunities, who they're joining. Reputation is coming up more than ever. And then on the client side, we're seeing that a lot of these, there's a lot more caution. Interviews are taking longer to schedule. There's a lot more hesitancy of is this the right person, and giving them an opportunity, as opposed to, I think there was a time when work was more, readily available. Let's bring somebody in, give them an opportunity. There's a lot more caution nowadays with hiring holistically. And I think where we're seeing the most, where we're seeing a lot of the pauses or a lot of the stalling, if you will, is in the interview process. And I'll be frank with you, that's always a big opportunity there. That's where you lose people very quickly. And I don't want to, that's one of the things that I'm seeing that I would say if there's an improvement that could be made irrespective of where you are in your hiring, definitely something that I'm seeing more of, but also an opportunity to retain top talent. And the thing is, obviously, reputations, and we can talk a little bit more later on about that, but the word travels quicker than ever before. I mean, I've seen that more now than I ever have before. We're talking to candidates, and immediately as soon as names come up, it's like they're not talking about not even the company culture as much as more of, hey, I heard their interview process isn't where I would like it to be, or I'm very, very cautious to talk to them because I don't know if I'll get a call back or if I'm going to get interviews set up as streamlined as maybe others would, if you will.
That's amazing. So like candidates, it seems like they have even more hurdles in front of them. They have this more information. They're able to vet these companies and do research on these companies that they couldn't do before. And then the contractors, you're saying not all of them, but a lot of them aren't responding quick enough. They're losing opportunities to get great leaders on their company just because they're not doing it quick enough. Have any of the places changed where these mid to upper level people are searching for opportunities? Has that changed and evolved at all over the last couple of years? Like, I know like in the past, it was like job boards and, referrals and those types of relationships. But do you see, like, is there a shift in how they're finding these opportunities compared to the way they used to?
Yeah, it's been, I would say it's been refreshing to see the use of one of the big social platforms, right? And I don't know if I'm able to share, but, LinkedIn is a very
Sure.
popular platform, and it's being much more utilized nowadays. And I'm seeing this from employers themselves going direct to market to go after people, to just market their opportunities, and candidates are much more engaged on that platform than ever before. So I would say that's been great, because it only increases the professionalism. And it also, one of the things that I would say a shift in a positive way, and I always talk about the professionalism specifically for this industry. We always hope, right, especially for the frontline workers, and hoping to develop new talent, also attract talent from other industries. It's always one of those things. It's like, if our industry, you think about some of these legacy operators that just started as a crew leader, and then they moved up the ranks, and they don't, sometimes they didn't think about, hey, let me update my resume, or hey, let me get involved socially on a platform like LinkedIn to really show what I've done, and how I've helped support either an organization or any particular market in general. So there has been a massive increase that we've seen in the use of this platform, which is, I'll be honest, it's created an increase in professionalism for the industry that both hiring managers and candidates can benefit from.
So like this discovery of candidates and also the discovery of opportunities at different companies is taking place now in a digital space a lot more than in the past. Instead of them just going to websites, trying to figure out what it is, seeing a posting on a job board, now this social media aspect of it's just becoming like, it's just increasing and growing. It used to just be, the thing like, here's my job update and I'm looking for work and that sort of thing. But now people are using that kind of as a long-term portfolio of what they can do. And I'm seeing that. So I would corroborate that.
I've also seen where, some candidates have like a YouTube channel, or even a YouTube, but more like a YouTube videos, if you will, where they're, highlighting their skill sets. So there's a lot more social media being used to leverage their people's skill sets. And that is much more valuable sometimes than, the CV or resume, if you will. Which is obviously, again, it's in our world, in this industry, there's so much that goes into what we're seeing, right? I mean, it's all work outdoors, and oftentimes we can't really determine quality unless we see it, and which is the beauty of this industry to begin with. But it's nice to see other social media platforms are being leveraged as well outside of LinkedIn.
So that's like a radical shift. Like, imagine, like we used to get these, we're looking at hiring somebody and it's the resume, it's the standard resume. I just imagine like, here's links to some YouTube videos of projects that I've helped direct, or some properties that I managed as an account manager. Like, that's amazing. Like, imagine having that layer as a company, that layer to kind of peer past the portfolio, resume, and actually look into the actual things you've done. That would be crazy. I mean, I don't think a lot of people would probably start doing this type of content, but that's encouraging to hear that it's actually starting to happen, because it's such a hard thing to hire people. You're looking at a piece of paper, you're having conversations, and you're trying to determine, really, does my gut feel good about this one? And that just shows so much more substantiation for what they're claiming. So that's pretty cool. So we talked a little bit about like how recruits are positioning themselves and how they're evaluating opportunities. What is the role of a company? Like, what are the missteps? What are the things that you see companies not doing well so that these recruits can't really even evaluate if this is a good opportunity? What are the things they're missing?
I can't speak enough about branding. And I'm not that,
Hey,
not the intention here, but I can't speak
I
enough
did not
about
pay
branding.
Tito to say that. So just so
Listen, I've been thoroughly impressed by some companies, and it makes our life so much easier. I'll give you an example. One company on the Pacific Northwest, they have a YouTube channel with, I think, over 1,000 videos. And if any candidate were to look into their channel, wow, like you can see the people working, you can see all the types of environments, all the things that they're doing. It's just so much easier for candidates to evaluate a new opportunity, if you will, right? At the end of the day, like that, how can they see? And I think more than ever, that transparency is becoming common, right? Now, if you think of like what ChatGPT is doing, for example, right? I mean, it's the more or less democratizing this transparency holistically. So now, all these candidates or people now have a kind of what is this? Can I look up reviews now? So I would say the branding piece is extremely critical, but I also feel like it's a missed opportunity in many instances. I'm seeing some contractors are doing very, very well and have been very fortunate to have, a great referral program where they're getting repeat business through their book of business. And then all of a sudden we get a call, hey, we're stock. We're not, our sales are kind of stuck, or, hey, we can't attract top talent. And it's just like, well, you haven't updated your website in 20 years. Right. And so, those things, candidates, I would say the marketplace is really looking at those things. And I feel like I don't want to say it's an easy opportunity, but it's certainly an opportunity where these, employers that's number one. Number two, I would say, hiring process. I can't tell you how many times something as simple as an organizational chart. Many of these companies don't even have those established, where their gaps are, future, what is it? What are their projections, hiring projections? We talk to many. It's just like, right now I'm in pain. I need this person, but I don't know, outside of that one position that we're going to fill, we really don't have an understanding of what that looks like in a year, 2 years, 3 years, plus. So, I would say, planning for your hires is critical. And I feel like that's also an opportunity that I find. And to tie to that, we'll sometimes see or talk to some hiring managers or contractors, and they don't know what they really need. And so I do think that there is an opportunity there as well to really, for everyone, before you go and hire, figure out what you actually need. And I do think we've supported many companies say, I may need X position, but realistically, based on what's going on, there's X position. And the amazing thing, this industry has amazing, consultants as well. They're able to help with that. But again, another opportunity there that I see. So those are the few that I feel. And the last one, interview processes. That with the hiring process, the most timely and clunky part of hiring is interviews. You're coordinating different schedules. Sometimes you're coordinating different hiring managers, different, decision makers in all of this. And I can't tell you how many times great companies lose great people because their interview process is not established. And, it's as simple as, hey, let's decide on how many interviews, when these interviews are going to take place. And I've advised, hey, block out your calendar for interviews, like an evergreen block on your calendar. So every Tuesday at 10 a.m., you've got an hour for anyone to interview, whoever it is. Again, if we're in an industry where we're relying on hiring constantly, you should probably think about blocking out that time and just keeping it there as a block for when these things pop up. Because, what I see, and not always are you hiring, but for the right person, you will make room for them. And so if you have an interview block, that could be super helpful. And I think that's probably one of the most painful parts of hiring that our clients in the industry invest the least amount of time in, because we'll just figure out a time to talk. And it's just like, no, be intentional about it. And I got to say, for those that do it that way, their hiring is extremely streamlined, quicker. They're picking up talent quicker than most. And the candidates, this is a very important piece. I talk about this all the time. The experience of a candidate when they're talking to a prospective employer, that spreads. Hey, 3 interviews and I was in the seat, right? I knew my comp plan, I knew my path, I knew all the things, I knew who I was going to talk to, I knew all that. And I think that's a huge opportunity that's oftentimes missed.
Yeah, I've talked to, friends, and it's not even this industry, just, mid to upper level positions they're interviewing for. And they're like, yeah, I'm on my 3rd interview. This has been like a month and a half now. I mean, that's like, you're going to lose somebody. I mean, most people, they're either frustrated, they want to get out, or they're having other opportunities that are coming into their purview, and they're going to capitalize on something that becomes available. Cause this is still just like, maybe this will work out, maybe it won't. So that's great to prioritize that. So, all right, well, let's do this. You talk about one of these things. I'm going to talk about another one. I think we know what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to probably talk about branding. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and mixed up a little bit. So one of these things that you just mentioned for a company to fix, which one you just talked about, scheduling interviews or the interview process, which one of those is like the low hanging fruit for contractors? Which one should they start on first?
Just have an interview process.
So tell me what is a great interview process for a mid to upper level position? What's the time frames between, like when they contact to the time you're reaching back to them? What does the interview stages look like? Who should be involved? Like what is a really great ideal process?
It depends. I'm going to go mid-level. You should probably not have any more than 3 interviews for mid-level position. Whatever that is, I would say from time to first interview to time to an offer accepted, typically would advise 2 weeks, right? And that is, first interview could be a phone call, a Zoom call. Typically, I would recommend that, right, to save each other some time. If there is an opportunity where you can bring that person, for an in-person interview and their schedule allows for that, fantastic, bring them in if you can. But oftentimes, just to save each other some time, I always kind of go into these types of situations always with the pretense of hiring managers have this thought of, I'm controlling this process because I'm bringing this person into my organization. In our world, we're looking at it mutually, right? If you're attracting top talent, typically they're going to be gainfully employed. And if you're speaking to these types of professionals, also keep in mind they're looking at it, what's in it for me as well, right? So it's a mutual type of a level set call for the initial ones, and then from there on out, ideally I would recommend maybe some tandem calls, panel interviews, quickly. Try to do that maybe on the second interview, and maybe a third interview more or less after you guys, after that panel or whoever it is that's going to make those decisions for hiring. The third interview is more or less to just make sure at that point you've called some references. At that point, if you've got some personality assessments that are part of your hiring process, great. You have collected that information as well. And it's more of, hey, are there any lingering questions, any additional concerns? And obviously put it in their court as well to see if it's mutually a good fit moving forward. And then, between those 3 interviews, I would say 2 weeks. On the executive searches, a little bit longer. Those are much more high touch. Keeping in mind, these are very oftentimes very sizable compensation packages. We in our world, we do several relocations at that level, right? And so it is sometimes coordinating, flights, accommodations, multiple panel interviews, multiple executives that are speaking to some of these candidates as well. If I were to give it a number, I would say no more than 6 interviews collectively, concisely. And typically we're seeing, from first interview, and keeping in mind, when we're any of these, whether it's mid-level or executive level searches, think about it. You probably want, I would say in our world, I always like to say, we like to kind of work with the Olympic medalists. You want to have a bronze, silver, and gold medalist. So you can kind of, gauge from there who's the top and who maybe one fits really or strong here, maybe not strong here. So it's good to kind of, for you to more or less benchmark the talent that you're talking to. All that to say that for an executive search, so if you can do it in 2 weeks, fantastic. If someone is not employ, that probably is possible. But for some of these executives who typically are, we're seeing it between 3 to 4 weeks from time that first call to for them to be in the seat or accepting an offer.
All right. So this is all well and good, like if you actually have candidates coming in, but I know a lot of companies that are listening or watching this right now, they don't have enough candidates and it's really hard for them to source those candidates. So I want to talk a little bit first about just some of these core fundamentals that you should be doing as an employer brand and some of the things that I believe are important, and you can corroborate that or give me some additional tips. And then I want to talk a little bit after that about how does a recruiter kind of fit into the mix of this? Because I know a lot of people have probably some preconceived ideas or questions around that. So I do want to kind of jump into that. But let's first talk about brand. I mean, I'll talk to a friend and they'll say, oh, I'm interviewing at this place, and they're really excited. And one of the reasons I always see them being really excited is not just because they have me in an interview and it's paying really well. The reason they're excited is because they're excited about the company. And they know that, it's a cool place to tell your friends you're actually working at. There's like runway, like, you can grow with this company. There's lots of opportunity. They have a really great reputation. It's one that, the opposite would be like, I don't want to tell anybody I work here because no one's ever heard of it. And they actually don't have a great reputation. So I think people just want to work for winners. No matter where you're at, if you're a landscape company or a marketing agency, anything, people want to come work for people that are doing really great stuff. And there's a really good buzz about it. And I think that what I see happening, you mentioned it earlier, is one of the fundamental things is websites. People, that's the first place people go. Then they go to social media, maybe one or the other, depending on their age. And they'll go there and they'll look and they're trying to get a quick representation. What is this brand all about? What's important to them? And if promoting themselves, bragging about awards, talking about how great it is really all you see, it's not very authentic. But if you see like team members talking about this, if you see, behind the scenes, you see people excited about their role. We talk a lot about recruiting. We make videos and stuff here with the marketing assets that we're creating. And, when people are happy and they're smiling on camera and you can see them like fist bumping and high fiving and jumping around and having a hoot in their job, or you hear them telling a story about their progression over the years in their career, that's the kind of company that someone will work for. Do you see that reflected in the real life, that theory? Do you see that reflected in some, for instances, like when you talk to recruits, do they mention these things in the interview process?
Once names are thrown out there, it's an instant, oh yeah, either, oh yeah, like I'm interested, or, oh no thanks. And there's nothing you could do to sell it otherwise. Reputation is the make or break for your hiring funnel. It just is what it is. And if you either are not trying to build that, and I want to, one caveat to that is, from a marketing standpoint, and something I see often is consistency. There are multiple places where people can see who you are, where you are, and who's working in your organization, what you're doing. If A doesn't match B and B doesn't match C and C doesn't match D and different platforms, there's going to be questions. So I did just a quick caveat to that, but I can't speak highly enough for us. That is usually, I would say, whether or not it's how easy it is for us to recruit for some of these contractors or not. And, I also, if I may, I'll add, in terms of like one thing that we find it super beneficial and I'll speak highly of the companies that are doing really well at it. I'm assuming some of these are your clients as well, but like career paths, right? Transparency with career paths. That's low hanging fruit. Have some type of career path, because what's in it for me? If I take a step back in terms of like what the makeup of this industry, I'm going to speak to the top, let's call it the top 100, right? You have the, multi-billion-dollar organizations and the, $50 to $75 million organizations. That's a huge gap. One is going to provide national opportunities, and many opportunities. And the other is hey, depending on where you are, regionally, it is going to depend on where how you move up within that organization. And so, and not to mention the next thing that's been a huge shift in this industry. We're hearing tons of it come up as well. And I think there maybe should be some transparency behind this. And this is the hot take. I have a lot of candidates are asking us nowadays if, are you privately owned, or are you, or is there private equity backing? And that's not to say there's one is good or bad. It's just transparency behind it, because some candidates prefer a private equity backed company. Some candidates prefer a privately owned company. And I still don't see enough information, disclosed up front. And we're speaking specifically for mid-level candidates on up, where that's important, right? And these are oftentimes different environments as well. And so I think there's an opportunity there from a marketing standpoint, from a branding standpoint too, to highlight, maybe the depth of one or the other. But no, look, I guess to answer your question originally, that is the best way to attract top talent. Some companies have it made because they've been around for a long time and have branding, consistent branding and marketing, and then doing all the right things, if you will. But some of the newer players, there's some, I know there's a lot of roll-ups still happening. There's a lot of rebranding still happening. Those are the types of things that maybe they can mimic from some of these well-established brands.
Yeah. So you talked about the career path. I love that. We keep trying to come up with different ways to actually visualize that. We did one recently on a website, which was kind of like 4 hubs to a wheel. And they were like operations, sales, support, and executive leadership or management. And then if you click into each one of those hubs, you can see like anywhere from 5 to 10 different possible positions that people could have. So like when you look at that, you're like, this is a world of possibilities here, and I think what people realize now is just because I start in one of those hubs doesn't mean I can't go over somewhere else, because I started in operations, then I went to sales and management, and now I'm doing marketing, and there's a lot of that lateral movement based on what people find a passion for. So if you can't easily see that and the world of possibilities in marketing assets, then you're just like trying to hope that a candidate can imagine that, which isn't going to happen.
If you're an employer, the perspective you should have from a branding standpoint is put yourself in the candidate's shoes, because the candidate's only thinking one thing: what's in it for me? That's it.
Well, so let's talk about that. So we talked about career path. Everybody knows pay is important, and that needs to be listed and generous and all that. But like, there are things that intrinsically go past just like, I have opportunity here and I enjoy my job. There's, increasingly more and more focus on just greater purpose, I think, in jobs. And careers. And I say purpose and impact. One thing that I always try to show in recruiting videos is you're not just doing the work, it's about how the work touches the customer. If you're doing a design build project, you're not just creating beautiful patios, you're creating environments where families and friends can connect and have conversations and develop like the most important moments of their life. If you're selling commercial landscape and you're working with property managers, you're helping other people enjoy their careers better by removing stress from their life and letting them deliver on the promises that they're making. So if you can convey that in your branding, in your employer branding, and have not your claims, but have your team members sharing their insights and sharing that perspective, then it's not just like this is important to us. You see it's important to them. You see it's important to their whole team. That says a lot. So I want to wrap this up and talk a little bit about, you're a recruiter, and a lot of people that are listening to this might have a justifiably bad opinion of recruiters, or maybe really little to no experience whatsoever. I had one interaction with a recruiter myself, and it was a generally positive experience where someone found me on LinkedIn and asked me to, I had a phone interview, and then we went out to dinner with the upper level management at this company. This is when I was at a landscape company before here. And I ended up not being a good mutual fit, so we didn't go anywhere, but it was a generally good, experience. But it was kind of weird for me because who is this person contacting me? Is this a scam? Like, what's going on? So there's something from a a candidate's perspective of like understanding what does a recruiter do. But then there's a lot of companies out here that are listening to this or watching, and they may not have used a recruiter, or they might have heard a bad experience from somebody else in the industry. Like, how is the ideal contractor recruiter relationship? How does that work in an ideal world?
Man, I appreciate this platform because this is what the recruiters are. I hate to admit this, but it's almost like the used car salesperson. Transparently, recruiters are paid fees as a percentage, typically, of someone's salary. Nothing to do with the candidate. Companies are paying a percentage of someone's salary for going to find someone else, right? And so, obviously, it's a sales-driven role, and unfortunately, there are a lot of recruiters out there who more or less treat these relationships, if you will, as a very transactional relationship. What does that look like? Well, I'm going to send you a bunch of resumes and see what sticks. So, and I want to start, and I want to preface to answer that question also by saying there are different types of recruiters, and I want to, kind of a shout out to every one of the recruiters that are listening to this, because what we do is not easy. So there are internal recruiters. These are recruiters that are hired by companies, right? And so typically they're posting jobs, and they're also reaching out to a lot of the candidates out in the marketplace. Their advantage is they're directly representing a brand. So it's easy. There's no ambiguity, in terms of what that is. Then there are, and then there's corporate recruiters who are more or less working for larger corporate conglomerates. Similar approach. These are typically higher volume. These are large organizations, so that they're typically handling a lot more of that, more onboarding support, if you will. And then there's agency recruiters, and agency recruiters are what unfortunately have the worst reputation in the world of recruiting, because unfortunately they become very transactional. And it's, hey, Chad, hire this person because I said so, as opposed to, hey, Chad, I spent an hour talking to this candidate. I called their references. I also asked them very tactical questions to make sure that this person's a good fit. And before we started even looking for this person, you and I sat down, Chad, for any given part of an hour, 2-3 hours, what we call discovery calls, this calibration calls, to understand what makes you different. What makes you different from your competitors? What are some of the criteria that you're looking for specifically for a candidate? And what is it that you would say, I would absolutely hire that person if you brought them to the table, as opposed to who would not be a good fit? And I think that's probably where where it's oftentimes missed. I've seen where some companies are using recruiters as a very transactional vendor. You're just bringing in resumes then. And look, I'll be honest, I don't allow that for me personally, and our agency is not built on that. It's built on relationships. Hence why you and I keep crossing paths in these events, because look, I back what we say. It can be slow moving, but I think for candidates to keep in mind is when a recruiter reaches out, look, ideally, if you're getting on the phone with them, hopefully they're asking you the right questions. Hopefully you can ask them the right questions. Oftentimes, and I would even go as far as to say, what type of engagement do you have with this company? There's a term called contingency and retained. One is there's an exclusive relationship with a company saying, hey, we're going to hire X recruiting agency to go find this one person. And there's two ways that they can do that. One, you can do that in a way that is confidential. Hey, it's a confidential search, so I don't want you to share the name. Or two, if it's just an open search and they're okay with sharing the names openly, if it's something that the company knows that this is happening. But I would challenge the candidates to, number one, just make sure that these recruiters have a good amount of information and they're armed with the right information about these opportunities to ensure that it's a fit for them as well. And also just respect that this craft is not just an instant. A lot of times when we're talking to candidates, they immediately think, I talked to a recruiter, the job is mine. Recruiters are hired to go find multiple options. As I mentioned, oftentimes depends on where you fall. If you're a very strong candidate, you're going to fall, you're going to be a gold medalist. Fantastic. Your chances are much higher. And I would say, if you're going to engage in these conversations, recruiters are not miracle workers if they don't have the appropriate information. Number two, it's okay to say no, just as easy as it's okay for an employer to say no as well. But no, it's something that there's a lot of ambiguity that candidates do not understand of what happens between, for in our end. And I would furthermore, I want to add in terms of the process, like what happened behind the scenes, I think is probably a big question. It's like, what are you guys doing to find these people? How are you? We're marketing just as much as you guys are for these companies internally. We're going out there and positioning opportunities and presenting opportunities rather than a lot of the candidates in the marketplace. One of two things can happen. Yes or no, I'm interested, right? Either I'm interested or I'm not interested. If I'm interested, hey, let's have a conversation. And ideally, if you're talking to if you're speaking to a recruiter, ideally the recruiter's armed with the appropriate information to convince you to make a change, and there's full transparency. We have a process for us. We want to disqualify before we qualify. If there's someone that doesn't meet a certain criteria, we're going to pass on them. One of those is, this happens often with executives, counteroffers, and this is very important for everyone to know, irrespective of what role. Counteroffers are probably the biggest, surprise, if you will. You're talking to a candidate, you're excited, and all of a sudden you didn't ask them what happens if you get a counteroffer from your current employer. What does that mean? Well, it could mean I might be waiting for a promotion. I might be waiting for a bonus. There's several things that could happen in that interim. And if you don't uncover that up front because you like someone so much, the surprise comes at the back end when you spent 5 interviews later, maybe resources to get them to fly to you and those types of things. It's just something that we like to do up front. And I would say, Chad, for us, I invest a lot in training and working with recruiting consultants. I collaborate a lot with other peers within the staffing industry to understand how we can bring a premium service for this industry. And the last thing I'd say is this industry needs more recruiters. And this is a call to that, whether it's internal, corporate, there has to be, and not only recruiters, but actually professionals who are actually walking people through the process of, here's an opportunity let's walk through what that looks like for you. Let's walk through your career progression and your ideal compensation packages. When can you start and all those things? A great recruiter should be able to do that for a candidate.
Yeah, I think what you guys do is valuable. And I think a lot of times contractors don't realize that, there's so much more to attracting candidates than writing a great job description and posting at the right spot and then getting the people in for the interview. Like, you guys are nurturing this. You have lists of talented people that want to change. So you have like this stable of like amazing professionals in the landscape industry that are looking for places to go. And you guys are developing a network for, maybe there's someone right now they don't, but maybe in 2 years they do. And you get what you pay for. Like, it depends. If you're a business owner and you don't have an internal recruiter, or you don't have people that are willing or able to do these types of things, you will pay for a service like this. But it could mean like saving yourself so much money and so much aggravation when you make a decision to hire somebody, and then you give them half a year of rope or more, you waste all that money, and then you're back to square one again. So not to say that everybody you place is always a gem, but there's so many questions that from you doing this hundreds of times that you already know to ask and already know how to cover. So I can definitely see the value in what you're doing if a contractor wants to pay for that.
100%. And I can't say enough for cost of vacancy, cost of having the wrong players in the wrong seats, cost of having the wrong players in the organization. That's the value. If you bring in an A player, from outside of, a new A player that's that's proven. And this is very important to note. If you're a contractor working with a recruiter, ideally they're able to articulate performance. You're not hired. If you're a performance machine in a performance organization, performance-driven organization, you need proven results. And I think that's the opportunity there for working with someone that's an external recruiter. Ideally, they can prove that someone's got that. And you never know, right? Obviously, there's a lot more nuances to it, but more or less, there is a cost of having a vacant seat, but also the wrong person. And obviously, if you're thinking about top grading, this is a great way to do that if you can.
All right. 2 quick questions. We'll wrap it up with this. What is one thing that anybody that's listening can do today that's going to help their recruitment efforts for the next year for these mid to upper level positions?
If you don't have an org chart, build one, find your gaps for 2026.
All right. And then what is one hill that you will die on?
Always have an interview process established. Always.
Yeah. Intervals, the steps, who's involved, all that stuff.
All the things. Absolutely.
Great tips. Well, Tito, thanks so much for joining us. If you want to find out more about Bloom Talent Solutions or connect with Tito and ask them a gazillion questions about what they do, who they've done it for, some success stories, I would encourage you to connect with them. You can go to getbloomtalent.com is their website. You can also look for Tito on LinkedIn. His last name is spelled Caceres. And if you're in the position where you're like, I think if we get some recruits, they're not going to be very excited about our brand. And you want to find out what our clients have been doing, not even necessarily work with us, but you want to copy and see what they're doing as far as like video and social content and websites. Be my guest. Go to landscapeleadership.com, click on clients in the menu and just take a look because there are some pretty impressive things that people are doing there. So Tito, until we meet again, buddy, I'm sure I'll see you probably this fall at one of the shows and we'll have a drink and hang out. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chad. Absolutely.